A 2-year and 1 law plan for eliminating crime. If we stated it is impossible to eliminate crime, no one would notice. If we claimed crime could be eliminated, a storm of criticism would emerge. Those who did not respond would be convinced it was a police state that was being promoted. The problem is we live in a monochrome world, in which every issue is black and white and every solution, a shade of gray. Wars are fought because the solution is not light enough for those who are white or dark enough for those who are black. White and black being an analogy for people on different ends of the political spectrum. The solutions we are able to arrive at are limited by our Weltanschauung or worldview. Even what we consider a crime has changed, as our worldview changed. At one time, prostitution was considered a moral crime, drug taking was a criminal use of narcotics, and theft property crime. In many places, they are not considered criminal or even deserving of punishment. But this is not the best way to eliminate or even reduce crime. Taking the onus off the police force does not constitute a reduction in crime, or even if it does, it ought not be the path we take. Criminal behavior is not just what the law says and is often diametrically opposed to what the law says. The law reflects the mind of the lawmaker, not the nature of right and wrong. We must look elsewhere than at the law if we expect to acquire an understanding of good and evil. Eliminating crime could be done in 2 years with a single law. But to say such a thing would not attract much attention, other than from those who take an inordinate pleasure from mockery. Everyone else would know the claim was insane or clickbait and ignore it. You still reading these lines, up to this point or even beyond the title, is the least likely scenario. So, let me attest to the fact that the title is as true as any general statement can be. That the task seems impossible is not due to the intrinsic nature of the problem. The improbability of a solution is due to a fundamental error the world makes when dealing with crime, and much else. Lawmakers think the problem is the violence of crime, so they attempt to identify and eliminate violent acts. Violence is not what we ought to be looking for nor be dealing with. Violence is what happens when we do not deal with crime. Violence is what happens when we let crime fester and rot. If we have violence, the likelihood is that we have waited too long before doing something. Violence happens when the social fabric has decayed, and we are back to the law of the jungle. Interestingly, many shops have a better understanding of crime than most lawmakers. Many shops, especially those offering delicate china, would post signs similar to the old refrain. Beautiful to look at. Delicate to hold. But if you break it, consider it sold. No one has a right to externalize costs onto others, including society and future generations. What we create in the way of costs is ours to pay for. The key to understanding crime and criminals is freeloading. Criminals are always parasites and crime always creates costs the criminal does not wish to pay for. The elimination of crime is the elimination of free riders. But the law and human rights ought not focus on criminals. We have a right to what we create. That is the fundamental truth we must start with. Saying that, we have to extend the same right to others. This is the point at which people become divided. This is the truth that reveals your spirit. Man made nothing that is natural. Even if you want to claim everything natural came by a natural process, you still cannot claim you had anything to do with it. So you have not helped your case. If we do not own the planet, who does? You might want to say the Earth owns itself, but then we are part of that ownership, so what portion of the planet is ours? Do we own our body? But if so, then all other things own what they are. We are not going down this rabbit hole, but claiming the Earth is natural and there is no God creates too many issues to deal with here. We postulate or speculate that it is God that created the planet and everything natural is of His sole domain. It is not something we have a right to. The first and original crime was usurping the authority of God to take what belongs to God. This is given life in the story of Eden, where the rights of God are negated and overturned by Eve and Satan. We want to eliminate crimes against us while we perpetuate the greater crime against God. The churches are as deeply involved in this abomination as the world. Christians think ecumenics is just about consolidating this conspiracy. We are to come together as one body, but in the meantime, we are like jackals fighting over the carcass of a lion. We have wolves among us. These are the ones who justify taking what does not belong to them. Yet, we talk about being a light on the hill and having criminals repent of their ways. It is time we looked at the beam in our own eye. It is us who are usurping the rights and authority of God. The churches have not been very successful in pursuing ecumenics, perhaps because they are attempting to reconcile whilst in sin. We cannot come to Christ while embroiled in sin, and we cannot come together as a church while tolerating those who live in sin to live among us. Coming to Christ is as much about leaving sin as it is about faith. One entails the other. For ecumenics to be possible, the church must systematically separate from the world. To do this, it must cease tolerating the overt sin of crime. All costs must be paid, and no cost is to remain unpaid. The person to whom a cost is owed is compensated by the church, and the person owing a debt must have the debt collected by the church. Those preventing the collection of arrears are processed through the judicial system. Punishments are tied to debts outstanding, which must be liquidated before being released from the system. The objective is to catch offenders immediately upon creating an expense. Unpaid bills are no longer tolerated. It is not impossible to implement such a system in this world, but it is highly unlikely because of the corruption. That being said, even the church is part of this world system and corrupted by the same evils that run free among non-believers. The believer must have the authority to control his dominion, the land for which he has assumed responsibility. We do not own, but we do not let others create costs and retreat. As believers, we exist to protect the property of God from freeloaders and squatters. If you add nothing to the land, get off of it, go elsewhere. Believers in the believing church must unite and come out of the fallen world. We need to establish a protected jurisdiction in which everyone creating costs are required to pay those costs. We must learn to take care to the little things before we will be given responsibility for the larger. Crime can be eliminated, but it has to be rooted out at the moment it emerges into daylight. But saying that, it has to start with us. We must work together to identify and eliminate all unpaid costs in our own house and work out from there. Without a strong foundation, we will not build far or high. We need to be honest, not just with ourselves but with criminals. We need to be specific about the costs they create and the process of reconciliation.